If your car feels slower, heavier, or just not as strong as when you bought it, this might be the reason. A hidden valve inside your intake is silently robbing engines of power every single day, and 99% of drivers have no idea it exists. I have seen perfectly healthy engines feel dead because this one part gets stuck. Today, I will show you what it is, how it fails, and how to fix it before it destroys performance completely. It was December 14th at 7:42 a.m., a freezing morning in a small garage outside Chicago. Frost crawled across the windows, the air smelled like cold metal and burnt oil, and the shop lights flickered awake one by one. A gray Honda Accord rolled in, the engine shaking just enough for a trained eye to notice. No warning lights, no misfires, nothing obviously wrong, just one quiet sentence from the owner that set the tone for the entire day. He said, "It feels like it lost half its power overnight." He is frustrated in that way only car owners get, the kind of frustration where you know something is wrong, but the car refuses to confess. He told me the story every mechanic has heard 100 times. Same gas, same commute, same habits. Everything felt normal, except the power. The throttle feels lazy. The acceleration is sluggish, and merging on the highway suddenly feels like dragging a trailer full of concrete. But no codes, no noise, no smoke, nothing dramatic enough to point a finger at. The car idled quietly, almost too quietly, like an engine holding its breath. When I blipped the throttle, there was a hesitation, not a stumble, not a misfire, just a faint, unnatural delay before the engine speed climbed. A subtle sign that the engine is not breathing the way it should. I leaned closer, listening to the soft flutter inside the intake, something most drivers will never hear. It was the sound of air turbulence, uneven and choppy, the acoustic footprint of an engine trying to suck in more air than it was allowed to. Inside the shop, the scan tool booted up with its familiar beep. Live data streamed across the screen. Short-term fuel trim was slightly elevated. Long-term fuel trim was drifting upward. Not enough to trigger a check engine light, but enough to tell me the ECU was compensating for something it did not understand. Airflow looked normal at idle. Throttle angle made sense. MAF readings were stable. Timing was smooth. Compression numbers were solid. This engine was healthy, yet it felt starved. The owner watched, pacing a little, as if waiting for bad news or validation, or both. He asked, "Do you think it is the fuel pump?" And then, "Or maybe the injectors?" Common guesses, logical guesses, wrong guesses. Customers usually think the problem is fuel, spark, or air. But this issue sits in a gray area between all three, hidden in a place no driver looks, and most mechanics overlook it unless they have seen the pattern before. I revved the engine again. The engine speed climbed, but the car did not sound awake. It sounded held back, like someone had placed a restrictor plate inside the intake. There was no stumble, no shake, no knock, just a dead zone in the power band that should not be there. It reminded me of dozens of cars I had seen over the years. Fords, Hondas, Mazdas, Nissans, engines that felt like they had aged 100,000 miles overnight. Engines that acted like they were suffocating under an invisible weight. The owner told me something that confirmed my suspicion. He said, "Cold mornings are the worst. Once it warms up, it feels a little better. Still slow, but better." That was the clue. Temperature-dependent airflow problems are almost never injectors, fuel pumps, or spark-related. They are mechanical. Something is sticking, binding, or refusing to move when it is cold. Something inside the intake that should open and close with precision is moving like it is coated in glue. I popped the hood and removed the intake snorkel. There was a faint oily residue around the housing. Nothing alarming, but enough to hint at crankcase vapors settling where they do not belong. The engine warms, and I listen again. The idle smooths out too much, like the engine is compensating for restricted airflow. Engines need turbulence at low RPM and open flow at high RPM. When those two worlds get mixed up, power collapses. I watch the owner's face shift as he senses the tension building. He knows I'm circling something important, something the car has been hiding for months. He steps closer and asks quietly, "So, what do you think it is?" I take a breath and close the hood gently, letting the suspense settle like dust in the cold air. "I've seen this exact pattern before," I say, "and when I find it, most drivers don't believe something so small could steal so much power." Deep inside the intake manifold, buried under plastic covers and vacuum lines, is a hidden valve. A system of tiny internal flaps that silently controls your engine's breathing. When it sticks, hesitates, or fails, your car loses power instantly, without a warning light, without dramatic symptoms, without leaving any obvious trace. And this driver, like thousands of others, has no idea that this little-known valve has been quietly strangling his engine for months. If you think a clogged filter or bad gas hurts performance, wait until you see what happens when the valve that controls your entire airflow strategy starts to fail. This is the moment most engines begin to die long before their time, and most owners never even know why. Here is where the story really begins. Now we go looking for the valve that kills engines silently. And once you understand how it works, you'll never ignore this symptom again. When people think of engine power, they imagine fuel, spark, compression, the classic trio. But in modern engines, the real puppet master is AIR flow. Every ounce of power your engine makes depends on how smoothly, how quickly, and how efficiently air enters the combustion chambers. And the moment something interrupts that airflow, power doesn't just dip, it collapses. This is where the hidden valve comes in. Deep inside the intake manifold, behind layers of plastic covers, brackets, and vacuum lines, there is a set of internal flaps known by many names: IMRC, tumble flaps, swirl valves, and runner control valves. Different brands, different designs. They serve the same purpose, to control AER flow at different revolutions per minute ranges. These flaps change position depending on speed and load, creating turbulence at low revolutions per minute for better torque, and opening fully at higher revolutions per minute for maximum power. When the system works, engines feel alive, smooth, responsive, efficient. When it doesn't, the engine suffocates. As I begin explaining this to the owner, he tilts his head, confused. The owner says he has never even heard of that. And that is exactly the problem. Almost every modern car has this system, yet almost no driver knows it exists. Even worse, when these flaps fail, they rarely trigger codes. They stick halfway open or halfway closed, or they move slowly instead of snapping into position. And the engine control unit tries desperately to compensate by adjusting fuel trims, ignition timing, and throttle angle. But no computer can overcome a mechanical airflow choke. I connect the scan tool again, this time focusing on intake runner position, manifold pressure changes, and throttle response curves. And there it is, a lag. When the throttle opens quickly, the airflow should spike instantly. But in this car, it rises slowly, like the engine is pulling air through a clogged straw. At 1,500 revolutions per minute, torque is low. At 3,000 revolutions per minute, it should roar. Instead, it groans. And past 4,000 revolutions per minute, the engine sounds like it is pushing against its own lungs. The owner leans over my shoulder watching the data. Numbers mean nothing to him, but the hesitation he hears, the sluggishness he feels, that is real. That is the hidden valve at work, or rather, it is not working. I explain what happens when these valves stick. Carbon and oil vapor from the positive crankcase ventilation system coat the flaps over time. They become tacky, sticky, and slow. In winter, they stiffen. In summer, they bake. Some engines use tiny electrical actuators, and others rely on vacuum diaphragms. Either type can fail silently. When they do, the flaps freeze in a position that is wrong for most driving. Too closed at high revolutions per minute, the engine cannot breathe. It loses horsepower instantly. Too open at low revolutions per minute, the engine loses torque, runs rough, and feels weak. Stuck in the middle, you get the worst of both worlds. The engine is not broken, it is suffocating. I tell him what I have seen over the years. Cars are misdiagnosed with failing turbos, clogged injectors, weak pumps, even worn-out engines, when the real culprit was this simple valve system hidden in the intake. People replace coils, plugs, sensors, and fuel pumps, yet the problem remains. And every day the flaps stay stuck, carbon buildup worsens, efficiency drops, and the catalytic converter suffers from inconsistent combustion. This becomes a chain reaction. Poor airflow causes poor combustion. Poor combustion causes rich running. Rich running produces soot. Soot covers oxygen sensors. Bad oxygen sensor feedback triggers fuel trim corrections. Those corrections lead to more rich running, more soot, and suddenly one stuck valve has damaged the entire combustion ecosystem. The owner sits quietly as this sinks in. He asks, "So this is why it feels so weak?" I nod. "Your engine has not lost power. It is being held back." Then I show him a simple demonstration. With the intake hose removed, I manually command the IMRC actuator with the scanner. At idle, the flaps should pulse. They do not. At 2,500 RPM, they should snap open. They move, but sluggish, like they are fighting glue. When I release the throttle, they should return immediately. Instead, they drift back slowly, sticking before they fully close. It is like watching a lung with half its capacity glued shut. That is when he finally sees it. Not through data, but through the physical behavior of the part. The tension breaks. He exhales. "I knew something was wrong," he mutters. "I could feel it." Because that is the truth about hidden valve failure. You feel it before you ever see it. Now he wants answers. He asks, "Can it be fixed?" "Oh yes," I say, "but fixing it is only half the story. First, you need to know exactly why these valves fail, how to prevent it, and how to clean or repair them safely without damaging the manifold. And that is where Act 3 begins, because what comes next is the most important part. Your engine has been suffocating. But freeing it? That is easier than you think. Fixing a stuck IMRC or intake runner valve isn't magic. It isn't guesswork. It isn't one of those vague, maybe it'll help repairs. It's mechanical truth. When air can move freely again, the engine wakes up instantly, like someone lifted a weight off its chest. That's why this final act feels so satisfying. You're not just diagnosing a problem, you're reviving the power your engine still has, but hasn't been able to use. I start by explaining the first step, diagnosis through motion. With the engine idling, you should be able to watch or feel the actuator respond. Most engines will cycle the valve briefly on startup or when commanded through a scan tool. If the actuator twitches, hesitates, clicks, or moves only halfway, that already tells a story. Mechanical binding, vacuum loss, weak actuator motor, carbon buildup. Every hesitation has meaning. A good IMRC opens with crisp authority, no drama, no delay. A bad one looks tired, sticky, confused. Once we confirm the system isn't moving correctly, the real work begins. Removing the intake hose reveals the hidden battlefield inside. A ring of oil vapor residue, dust, and carbon coats the throttle body and intake runners. This is where the PCV system dumps its vapors, and those vapors become sticky enemy number one. Over time, they glue the flaps in place. You can't see the flaps directly on many engines, but the symptoms tell the truth. And when the intake manifold comes off, that's when it becomes undeniable. The flaps are coated in a dark, tacky film. The pivot points feel gummy. Sometimes the shafts are almost locked in place. The fix is part cleaning, part freeing, part prevention. The cleaning comes first. I use only intake-safe solvent, not brake cleaner, not carb cleaner, nothing harsh enough to damage coatings or seals. With the manifold off the car, the flaps get scrubbed until they move like new. Every hinge, every pivot, every sealing edge has to be spotless. When you feel the flap rotate smoothly with 2 fingers, like a precision instrument instead of a sticky door hinge, you know you're making progress. Then comes the actuator. Vacuum-operated ones get checked for leaks. A tiny tear in a diaphragm can cause weeks of confusing symptoms. Electronic motor-style actuators get tested for full range of motion. Sometimes the actuator works fine. It's the flaps that we're binding. Other times the flaps move freely, but the motor is dead or the position sensor is lying to the ECU. You fix what's broken, not what's nearby. That's how you avoid wasted money and wasted time. With everything cleaned and freed, the manifold goes back on. Bolts torqued evenly. Gaskets replaced, sensors reconnected, no shortcuts. An intake leak here can mimic a stuck flap and confuse the entire fuel management system, so precision matters. Once everything is sealed and ready, the moment of truth arrives. Start the engine. The first seconds are quiet, the ECU relearning idle, trims settling. Then the engine takes its first clean breath. The throttle response snaps, the hesitation vanishes. You tap the gas and it feels eager again, not reluctant. Airflow has returned to normal, and the difference is instant. Engines don't hide their gratitude. But there is one more step, the step most people skip: conditioning. Cleaning the valve solves today's problem, but preventing it from happening again solves tomorrow's. You do that by addressing the root cause: carbon and oil vapor entering the intake. That means good PCV function, fresh air filters, properly serviced injectors, regular throttle body cleaning, and when necessary, intake valve cleaning on GDI engines. When those upstream problems are controlled, the IMRC stays clean for years. I hand the keys back to the owner and tell him to take a drive. 5 minutes later, he returns with wide eyes, half laughing, half stunned. He says it feels like a different car. He says he did not realize how weak it had gotten until now. And that is the most common reaction, because this kind of power loss creeps in so slowly that drivers forget what their engine used to feel like. Restoring the valve does not add power. It brings back the power the engine already had. And here is the reality. Almost every modern car will face this issue eventually. The design guarantees it. Oil vapors, carbon, and heat cycles all conspire to gum up the system. But now you understand the cause, the warning signs, the damage it creates, and the exact method professionals use to fix it. Your engine was not tired. It was not old. It was not weak. It was suffocating. And now it can breathe again. If this opened your eyes to how one tiny valve can destroy power, do not stop here. Your engine has more hidden killers you have not discovered yet. Tap the next video on your screen, because it reveals the part that silently wears out 10 times faster and costs drivers thousands. Watch it now before it happens to your car.